Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a part of the sales team here in Security Centric, and we're bringing you this LinkedIn video to discuss M365 and secure configuration reviews with Jeff Hunt, a part of our engineering team.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, I'm Jeff Hunt, engineering manager here at Security Centric. Thanks for the introduction. So we wanted to just chat a little bit about secure configuration reviews on Microsoft 365. Everyone in the world is using it for email and Entra ID and OneDrive, and it's all your crown jewels. It's your user authentication. So as a platform, it's a big one. When we talk about secure configuration reviews, we're talking about you've set up an M365 tenancy, you've got Entra ID out of the box. If you were to set it up today, the defaults are pretty good from security settings wise, but that's not the reality of the world. The reality is that most people have probably set up their M365 environment years ago, a decade ago, and haven't had the opportunity to benefit from what the defaults are now versus what they were a few years ago. And so when we talk about secure configuration assessment reviews, what we're really talking about is going through very methodically conditional access policies. Are you blocking legacy authentication? So there are older authentication methods, particularly for email, so SMTP, for example, that don't require MFA. So if you haven't got a conditional access policy in place that enforces MFA on legacy protocols, you can compromise a password and log in with an older email client. I say it still is one of the primary attack vectors. So even, for example, you might have MFA configured in your environment correctly, and that's cool, that's great. At some point, a user in your environment might need to reset their MFA method or register a new one. And what we've seen in the wild is some particular golden threat actors, APTs, will actually try and impersonate the user and call an IT help desk and get that MFA method re-registered to a device they own. Mm-hmm. Call up, forgot my password, or lost my MFA device, and actually impersonate the user, try and get it registered. So from that particular actor, what we also have in our list of things is requiring that you must register from FA from a known device or from a managed device. So even in that case where someone is able to impersonate, you can't just go and register on any device. It has to be on a company managed device. Everything comes from a known and trusted source.
And it must be quite difficult with those kind of changes in organizations. There must be a little bit of pushback. So to my question, what is the most pushback you see from organizations about implementing these MFA controls?
There's really two categories of pushback, two of the biggest ones. One is not knowing what accounts you might have that require a legacy authentication. You might have a user account that requires SMTP and can't MFA. It might be hooked into another service, a service account that can't MFA. So sometimes not understanding that is that's where you have to start. You have to know what accounts are trying to log in without MFA and pulling that curtain back a bit. And the second one is impact to users. We see users not wanting to install an application on their phone, for example, to give MFA codes. We see them not wanting to be, and rightfully so, impeded in doing their work, or being forced to put in MFA codes more often than maybe they have to. So we also look at session controls around how often should someone have to put in an MFA code, particularly from the same device, right? So if you've logged in one time on this device, you put in an MFA code, maybe we say we wait 2 weeks until you have to do it again. And then they don't get prompted every time they log in. So there's some extra controls you can put in place to help ease the impact of rollout, particularly for a user.
And do you find that some organizations only want to put MFA on for certain types of people? Maybe they don't put the legacy systems on it. What's the recommendation around that?
Look, the recommendation is put everyone on MFA and then figure the rest out later. Obviously we're a security company. Everyone should be on MFA. The reality is sometimes maybe that's not totally doable, and that's okay as long as it's a known risk. But the aim would be eventually to get everybody and everything requiring MFA.
Look, how does the benchmark address the balance between security and productivity when it comes to permissions? Look, another thing, Jeff, that we're seeing a lot of in the wild at the moment is around DLP. Um, so look, what are the key DLP recommendations in the benchmark that organizations often miss?
There's several crucial elements of a DLP policy. One is understanding what data you have, and how you label already. So how do you classify the data that you've already got? What kind of data is the organization dealing with? Who has access to what data? And then really understanding what are the allowed methods from a policy perspective. How are they allowed to share that data? Are they allowed to share it externally? At the very least, using Microsoft 365 DLP inbuilt policies for protecting against PII is the first step. They have a lot of inbuilt rules that you can enable out of the box, and then you can move to sort of customize it from there. So we see every organization, we see people sharing data with the wrong person, or it's more often than not malicious. It's an accident. Call it exfiltration of data, but it's someone accidentally sending a spreadsheet full of PII to the wrong person, or outside the company. Maybe they've CC'd the wrong person on the email. So DLP rules are intended to catch that scenario, to block it, or to take some action to hold it for review or something like that. So just making sure that when someone does take an action that they maybe didn't necessarily intend to, that the tool steps in and can help take an action there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Maybe a question around DLP as a whole. Do you notice many organizations implementing good, solid DLP policies and controls and tools?
Look, when we go through these assessments, we see a wide gamut of. Some have implemented quite well, so they've got very granular. They understand their data quite well. But then on the other end of the spectrum is there are some that don't have any DLP rules enabled, or maybe they've only got them enabled in audit mode only, which is also a common one we see, where they've been configured and someone's gone through the effort to set them up, but they're not enforced. So obviously the audit mode will generate an alert and will tell you when something happens, but it won't take an action to stop. And that's really what this is sort of about. This assessment is a second set of eyes. We do the same thing here. We configure something, someone else looks at it. So when one person does a thing, often having a second pair of eyes look at it just to validate that something is done correctly is always really helpful. So that's sort of what we do. So we go through, the account is there, all these settings are configured. We'll go through and just double check. And sort of point out where maybe something was slightly misconfigured, something may have been missed, something was forgotten, just to find all the little loopholes that something could happen.
You mentioned something there around audit and logging, etc. What specific audit logs should organizations be focusing on? I know there's a number of different types, but it'd be good to let the people know.
Yes, at a minimum, your sign-in logs for all authentication attempts, across Entra, logging into anything and everything. So the email, the Office.com platform, any of the apps that you might have configured through SSO. So all authentication attempts, number one, minimum, definitely need to be logging that.
Let's talk implementation strategies, Jeff. Again, there's a number of different types of reviews. Let's hear it from the man who does it himself. What's the best way to get this going?
Look, first thing is just understand where you are at the moment. So a form of discovery or a baseline assessment. So we would suggest that we would come in and have a look at what have you got already, what's configured, and assess it against our control set of recommended settings.
Yeah.
Give you a bit of a baseline, a gap assessment of here's where this account we think should be, and here's where you are. So what controls are missing. And then from then we would prioritize what's missing based on biggest hit to increase in security versus low user impact. What are the things you should do now to better increase the security posture of your M365 platform, and how can you do that without impacting users too much? We would definitely go through, like I mentioned before, there's controls that you should do and there's controls that you must do. Once you've got your baseline assessment, you know where you are. It's really about how do you get to the point where you've got all those must-do controls implemented. once you've done that, it's really about assessing of the should do, which ones can you do?
Yeah.
And just case by case, each organization's different, each will have different controls implemented differently. What is right for your organization could be different, and coming up with a priority list of how we do post must controls.
It's quite interesting you said that, and just touching on the fact that, look, every organization is different. There's different people, some more technical than others within organizations. Stakeholder management. There's a lot of different elements to these reviews that you have to be careful with, and the ongoing implementation of them. So maybe that brings me to my next question. What are some of the technical challenges in implementing these things?
Technically, it's really sometimes not understanding your legacy applications, your legacy users, your tenancy itself. So what exists out there already.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about, for example, implementing a conditional access policy for MFA, what accounts will be impacted by that if you did turn that on? Technically, it's sometimes difficult to find out. So we've got tools that we help report on. You can put conditional access policies in an audit mode only first, and pull out some data around where that and accounts, what accounts would have failed, and make a call on whether they're excluded or get them up to speed on being able to log in with a modern authentication method. Technically, sometimes it comes down to resource or monetary constraints on monitoring. So you mentioned logging. Obviously, what you can log, to what extent you can log, how long you can retain it for, is both a technical and a financial challenge. So do you ship them off to a separate platform, central logging? Is that tool implemented? Maybe there's a technical challenge of implementing that tool. And lastly, it's really about keeping up to date constantly with a changing environment. So it's not about a one and done scenario. It's do it once, but then how do you set a schedule to keep on top of that stuff? And technically that can be a challenge from a resource perspective, like who in the organization is going to be the owner of that, and who's going to take accountability for keeping up to date.